Well, I was an ROTC cadet at Yale University in '61 through '3, graduated as an infantry officer. I went to Fort Benning for Ranger School and Airborne School, and I had studied a little bit of political science and history, but I really didn't know much about Vietnam except what I'd read in the Life magazine. And there were a couple ROTC instructors who gave us the party line and the domino theory, so that we were motivated. I was highly motivated, went to the 82nd Airborne Division and jumped out of planes for 2 years, which was a great job. Platoon leader and staff officer for a while. And then I got orders to be an advisor in Vietnam, a MACV advisor, and I went with good friends, studied the language, studied special warfare, went over in July of '65 as an advisor in the Delta down with the rice paddies and worked with the Vietnamese. And then I got orders out of the blue to join the 1st Cav. In a week I was up at An Khê, and the 1st Cav flew in 3 or 4 days later. And then everything changed because I was with an American unit, Airmobile, brand new, fancy-dancy crowd with lots of helicopters and American guys, which made all the difference in the world. Well, in the Ia Drang fight, Joe and I and Colonel Hal Moore and 5 or 6 other guys were right at the CP in the 1st Battalion's X-ray position for most of the fight. And I never met Joe. He was probably a civilian journalist. I had no clue who he was. Never saw him, never talked to him. But he and I were probably within 10 feet of each other. I was the XO of a rifle company, and I had 120, 140 guys to worry about, along with a CO. Flew into X-ray on the morning of the 15th and served there for 2 days under fire. Then the North Vietnamese seemed to pull back. The 1st Battalion flew out, went back to Play Coup to celebrate their victory. And the next morning we marched out of X-ray into Albany and suffered 70% casualties at Albany. Having survived that, I came back and eventually came home. This kind of a reunion for me is sacrosanct. I see guys who I served with, who have experienced that fight, who are wonderful guys. I couldn't describe how strongly I feel about the guys who served over there and served their country, and anybody who's ever served in the military. They're all gems as far as I'm concerned. Leadership on the ground is important. Keeping your commanders informed is important. When the bullets start to fly and you see guys dropping around you, you've got to think of your job and what's important. Get that job done as best you can. X-ray was a superb example of good leadership as far as I was concerned. Colonel Moore did a great job, and his staff was fabulous. They had air cover, they had artillery. As soon as they needed it, they didn't let anything get out of hand, even when it was a real challenge. So I saw that and I thought, this is great. I'm very proud to be in this unit. The Albany fight was totally different. The unit involved had been pieced together before the cavalry came over to Vietnam. I don't think they hadn't trained together. There were some very good NCOs, Korean War vets. There were some terrific captains, a lot of fine lieutenants and sergeants. But when we were ambushed and overrun at LC Albany, there was only one unit that stuck together, and that was our company, A Company, and we saw it all unwind. It was a very bad fight. But I did see people rising to the occasion. Our battalion executive officer got air cover that saved us. Our battalion S3 circled the perimeter, made sure the positions were right. I think the good officers tried to do that. So it was good units, are a result of a good leader, and a good leader will fight well in combat. The other units behind us got decimated. They were overrun, chopped up. They had no command structure. And at the end of the day, they had small pockets of wounded, fending off groups of North Vietnamese who were shooting them. And that was a terrible bloodbath. There was one other unit in the back of the column that the company commander had run all the way back through the column because he'd been called forward to battalion commander. And he made it all the way back to the end of his column and rounded up his company and formed a perimeter, and they survived. So leadership is absolutely critical. That's one lesson. The other lesson is you got to know where the bad guys are so you don't bungle into them like we did. And when you do, you've got to call for help and get reinforcements fast. One of the most outstanding aspects of Albany was John Wallings' unit, B Company, flew in to save us in the evening. And it was the most incredibly brave helicopter assault I've ever seen. And they came firing into our battle, and landing, shooting to the left at the bad guys who were shooting at them, and coming to the right where we were holed up in a perimeter. It was just amazing. I'd finished the first draft of the memoir that I'd started back in 80. I dropped out of the Army, I dropped out of law. I wanted to write a book, teach, which is what I was doing. I wrote the first draft and had about 2 years of work into it, and decided I better go back to Washington, D.C. and compare my recollection with what the history branch had in the Army office. I met a wonderful guy from the 101st, and he was doing sort of the same thing for his book, and he said, "Let's go over to the wall." I said, "I've never been to the wall." It had just been built, and in fact, it had just been dedicated. And it was a rainy afternoon. We went back to the wall. All the grass was muddy and messed. There was tractor marks on it. There was this black, gaping marble cut in the earth with all the names on it. And that was my first visit. I went back for the first real time in 1990. For the first real time, I came to a reunion. It was the 25th anniversary of our battle in the Ia Drang. Hal Moore called me up and said, "Come on down and help us lay a wreath." And I did, and that was a wonderful reunion. It was the first one I went to, and I've been to almost everyone since the last 25 years. And that's when I really focused on the wall. It was a beautiful day. There were tremendous people there. There were all kinds of Cav guys there with their hats, but I could not approach the wall. So they called me one of those tree huggers. And it took me 2 years to get down there. And when I did, it was very therapeutic, but it took a long time. It's a beautiful monument. An appreciation for 58,000 men, women. And it cost 58,000 plus American boys and girls. So it's a very powerful movement. It honors the memories of the dead. And Hal Moore is very famous and very good lesson. Hate the war if you want, but don't hate the guys you sent. And for Christ's sake, when they come home, don't spit on them.